Okay, so today we will be studying uh, a poem by Emily Dickinson, and the poem says, "Have you got a brook in your little heart?" So it is poem number 3 of Exploring New Horizons, which is the textbook for semester 5. So first, before starting the poem, we will be discussing about the author. So Emily Dickinson's born in 1830 and died in 1886. She was one of the greatest poets, one of the greatest American poets of her times. So she died in the age of 55, and her poems were usually something which were written in unconventional syntax and structures, which are full of surprises, and they are full of imageries. So she used to describe in her poems a lot of imageries where she used to uh, show beautiful landscapes and all of that. So Emily studied at Mount Holyoke Female Seminary in South Hadley, where she excelled, becoming proficient in Latin, English, literature, and other subjects. By owning to frequent bouts of ill health, she left the seminary. We know only a few details of her personal and interior life, but her poems remain a testimony to an intensely sensitive mind. So Emily Dickinson died at the age of 55 from Bright's disease. So the poet had told her sister Winnie, who was close to her all through her life, to burn her letters. Okay, so when Winnie was trying to do this, to her surprise, she discovered a box with 1700 poems. So Minnie refrained from burning these treasures. Mabel told a family friend published the first edition of the poems in 1893. So although her poems were unfavorably received upon publication, she is now regarded as major American poet. So when you talk about this poem, "Have You Got a Brook in Your Little Heart?" it was included in the 1924 edition of Dickinson's complete poems. So the poem is a typical of Dickinson's poetic work in its use of symbolism and evocative use of language to express abstract ideas and ideals. So the poet talks about the little brooks of love and kindness that need to be nurtured in our hearts. So first and first, what is a brook? Brook is a natural stream or a water which is smaller than a river. So when talking about the first paragraph, so we'll start with the first paragraph. "Have you got a brook in your little heart, where bashful flowers blow, and blushing birds go down to drink, and shadows tremble so?" Okay, so rather than still waters running deep, Dickinson presents us with an image of a little heart with no, she uses little heart's imagery with a brook, not a river. So it its flowers are bashful. Bashful means shy and so delicate, and it is a place where even the birds blush to drink water, and their shadows tremble. Tremble means they move here and there jerkily from where the directions are up or down or sideways. So if they weren't enough, it can get swollen to bursting in the floods of spring. Its bridge often go, and in late summer it might very well dry up altogether. Okay. So this is the second paragraph, which says, "And nobody knows, so still it flows, that any brook is there, and yet your little draught of life is daily drunken there." So the poet asks the reader directly whether or not she has a little brook of her own, implying that some people don't have their life spring. Perhaps they just plod along lifelessly, or perhaps they have a less vulnerable source of life. Brook people get easily overwhelmed with floods of emotions, or wither away without any life-giving water to replenish it. Maybe river people keep a more even keel. Okay. So when you talk about the first line here, so So Dickinson's has the first line puts me on the spot. Am I alive enough? Do I have such a lovely spot inside me? Yet by the end of the poem, I am questioning the value of such a vulnerable source for a little draught of life. Perhaps the key word is little. A little heart requires only a little draught of life. The voice itself is little and bashful, opening with that timid sounding question. Several phrases are inverted in the service of rhyme, and this always strikes me as lazy. So Dickinson doesn't need to do it in other poems, but here we have so little it flows, and the meadows parching lie. So the meter and the rhyme, however, move the poem along at a nice bubbly Brook pace. Several long O words and rhymes provide a nice open feeling. Blow, somebody, nobody knows, flows, overflow, go. The meter is charming combination of iams and entapests, and nobody knows, so still it flows. Can be read as I am, antepest, I am. Similar patterns are seen in even the 9th and the 15th line. So like, why? Look out for little Brook in March. So it is, you can read it, iambic pentameter mein they are falling. So it seems like to me that Dickinson is writing about the source of her poetry. She wrote her poems alone in her room, and no one knew how many she has written. Her sister and lifelong friend were amazed at the quantity. Sometimes she might be flooded with creativity, and she was always aware of the fragility of it all. She knew very well that without a wellspring or rain, her poetry would go dry. So talking about the third paragraph, which says, why? Look out for the little Brook in March, when the rivers overflow and the snows come hurrying from the hills and the bridges often go. And later in August, it may be when the meadows parching lie. Beware lest this little brook of life some burning noon go dry. So talking about the season, so when you talk about March, so you can see the emotions, the river overflows, and even the snows come down off the hills, because the spring season is on the line. And when you talk something in August, it's a rainy season, it's autumn. So the meadows parching line means they are exploited because of the heat. Beware, she says, beware lest this little brook of life, maybe some noon it will go dry. So when you talk about this, she has compared the imagery to your life. Okay. So while Emmeline Dickinson was a prolific poet, she was never published widely during her lifetime. She wrote around 1800 poems, of which only around 10 were published during her lifetime. So contemporary commentaries indicate that she was hesitant to seek fame as a writer and preferred anonymity. So literary history has many writers who use as anonymously, or they use male pseudonym. So what is pseudonym? When you don't use your real name, when you use some other writer's name and you write according to that. So when you talk about the history, it was a male dominating society, so it is now. So for instance, Mary Ann Evans took on the pseudonym, and she used George Eliot's name to publish her novels, and there were many others who were doing the same thing. So when talking about the question answers, let's shift to question answers. It is a very short poem. So the first question is, what is the literary device used in the description bashful flowers? So it is a simile. So they have compared the flowers. Say the simile is used because they have compared the flowers to bashful, and bashful means shy or self-conscious. Okay. The next is, how does the poet characterize the birds drinking from the little brook? So the flowers bashfully nod their heads by the brook while the blushing birds come down and drink from the brook. So blushing, so they are blushing and they are trembled, their shadows are even trembled. So in which month do the rivers overflow and the snows come down from the hills? In the month of August, the river, in the month of March, the river overflows, and same, the snows come down from the hill. What does the poem warn about in the last stanza of the poem? So in the last two lines, Dickinson advises reader to take cognizance of the change occurring in life's brook. It is up to us how we deal with the change. In the last line, she uses metaphor in burning noon. It is a reference to the harsh ordeals of life. So the next question is, describe how the poet characterizes the little brook in one's heart. So have you got a brook in your little heart was written by one of the greatest American poets of the 19th century. So Emily Dickinson's this poem is all about a little brook of life. It flows slowly and steadily. Suddenly it evaporates at the moment of death. So it should be it should exist in everyone's heart that gives out softer emotions. So what do you think is the significance of the little draught of life? So a draught is something you would drink, like draft beer, and drunken is just past tense of drink. The draught of life is drunk daily there. People have various thoughts about what it means to have a draught of life in the little brook of your heart. Why does the poem say, then look out for the little brook in March? Emily Dickinson's Have You Got a Brook in Your Little Heart is all about the human mind or the soul. So Dickinson's describe it as an unseen brook that flows within our hearts. It supplies energies to our spirit and constantly until it gets dry in the scorching heat of life. Hence the poet draws our attention to the change happening internally. So the next question is, why does the poet say, then look out for the little brook in March? No, sorry. Okay. So the next is, what does the drying up of the little brook symbolize in the poem? There are moments in our lives where we lose hope. As a result, the brook dries up. In order to keep it alive, we should never lose hope. So being attentive to change happening to the mind, soul, and taking care of it is one of the learnings that readers can take from the poem. Next question. Do you think the first stanza of the poem present a rhetorical question? Explain your answer. Have You Got Brook in Your Little Heart was written by one of the greatest American poets of 19th century, Emily Dickinson. The poem is all about the little brook of life. It flows slowly and steadily, suddenly evaporating at the time of death. This river exists in everyone's heart that gives out softer emotions. At times, it overflows with powerful emotion. There comes a time when it goes dry due to harsh circumstances maybe, or maybe the life is very sad at that time. By presenting this picture of brook, Dickinson beautifully describes the nature of human life, precisely incorporating subjective feelings with a universal theme. The title is the very first line of the poem. It introduces readers to an interesting concept. Dickinson locates a brook in everyone's heart. It is not clear whether the poet asks this question to herself or her readers. Whatsoever, through this metaphorical reference, it becomes clear that the brook is nothing but the soul. Besides, the usage of the term little creates an ironic effect in this line. In the following line, Dickinson's poetic persona refers to the bashful flowers also that blow near the brook. The phrase bashful flowers contains a personal metaphor. Here the inanimate flowers are invested with the idea of being shy. So the next line contains another personification. So according to the speaker, the birds are too shy to go down and drink from the brook. So the presence of this secret brook in one's heart makes the creature shy of the fact that they are entering one's deeply persona space. None has access to that spot except them. So in the last line, shadows are a symbol of ignorance. Here the poet refers to spiritual ignorance, the reflection of an object or water temples due to the position of water. The human mind is always in the state of restlessness. Only spiritual knowledge helps them to calm their mind, resulting in the stillness of water. Okay? Analyze the symbolism used in the poem. So in this poem, it is all about the brook. As I told you, it flows slowly and steadily, suddenly evaporating at the time. So it is somewhere in the hearts, which gives you softer emotions. So here the poetess has used the symbols where she has converted the brook into where you can show your emotions. And again, in the last two stanzas, Dickinson describes the impact of spring and autumn. So during the spring, it overflows as the snow starts melting, while in August, the meadows near it becomes dry. So does the river. So the speaker wants the listeners to take notice of it, lest it would go dry. Have you got a brook in your little heart? Consists of 4 quatrains or stanzas having 4 lines each. So she has used the ballad rhyme scheme, that is ABCB. So it means the second and the 4 lines rhyme together. For example, in the first quatrain, blow rhymes with snow. Similarly, in the last stanza, lie with dry. Concerning the meter, it also imitates the ballet meter. Alternative use of iambic tetrameter and iambic trimeter. Let's have a look at the scansion of the first in order to understand the overall metrical scheme. The title of the poem, Have You Got a Brook in Your Little Heart, is interesting enough to raise several thoughtful questions in our mind. Firstly, what does the brook stand for? It is a symbol of life, as I told you. It refers to your soul. To know the answer, one has to focus on the use of specific terms used in the poem. It can be reference to either life or the soul residing in our hearts. Indeed, it is like a little brook that remains hidden until one describes its importance. Hence, in the last stanza, the poet urges the readers to be aware of the brook of life, or it would go dry in some burning noon. So it is basically something about your emotions, how the life is going on. So this is the poem by Emily Dickinson, which says, have you got a brook in your little heart? So if you have any questions, you can write in your comments so that I can answer that one day when I'll be taking the question answers session. Thank you.